जी बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मेरा नाम है जी डॉक्टर मोहम्मद मुज़म्मिल हसन। आज मेरे साथ मौजूद हैं मिस्टर फिलिप। तो आज थोड़ा सा हम बात करेंगे इनसे यूएस कैटल के बारे में। तो हेलो मिस्टर फिलिप, हाउ आर यू सर?
I'm really well. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty fine. So I would like you to please give me a bit of your introduction, please.
I'm a farm manager. I grew up in the U.S., so that's what I do.
Okay.
Farm managing
You're
and
farm
consulting. Yeah.
So since when you are here in Pakistan?
Right around 10 years now, going on 10 years.
So how's your experience with living in Pakistan?
Oh, really nice.
It's really nice.
Pakistani people are great. I love the Pakistan people.
Thank you very much.
Very humble, very easy. 2 thumbs up for the Pakistan people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I would like to share your experience with the audience, with the viewers. So what you think about the U.S. cattle? What's about the quality? What's about the genetics?
Well, I think genetics are the same anywhere you go, but the U.S. they seem to be able to, let's say, manipulate the genetics a little bit faster because of their economics there. So the cattle you're going to get from the U.S. is probably going to be a little bit more refined than you would get, let's say, from other countries. Although the genetics are fairly equal in all countries, because it's a universal. What is the word I want to use? It's pretty universal, the genetics. The bulls are shared from country to country, so that's all pretty equal. It's all about how you select.
Okay, tell me one thing. Most of the people, most of the time, they used to call us and they ask us, how can we just by looking the animal, we can estimate whether it's an Australian Friesian, it's a Dutch cattle, it's a US cattle. Is there any way by looking the animal, the phenotypical appearance, can we tell whether it is US or Dutch or Australian?
Never. You can never really tell which cow is from Australia because the genetics are pretty equal in all countries, like I said. And even in the U.S., they've got different breedings for different farms, right? So you're going to see more of like a healthier cow in some parts of the U.S., where if you go to the western part of the U.S., you're going to see more thin, a different sort of a cow. So it depends on what part of the U.S. you're selecting from, basically. But genetics are basically the same everywhere. You're not going to be able to distinguish if this cow is from Holland or if this cow is from Australia or America or Brazil, because they're all, like I said, the genetics are all fairly equal. So it's all about how you select the cattle.
Okay, tell me one thing.
I'll tell you many things.
Thank you very much. Actually, when the people used to came and visit the farmers, and what they claim with the Australian cattle, they claim about 6,000 to 7,000 liters of milk in the first lactation. And what the people, they came here with the farmers and they're talking about the US cattle and they're claiming the milk production to be above 10,000 liters in the first lactation. So what is that? Why there is a difference when you're talking about the lactation yields, when you're talking that the cattle and the genetics is the same? Why those cattle, they are not performing the same way the US cattle performs? What is the basic thing behind?
Well, I can't say that statement is exactly reliable or true, because if you select a really good Australian cattle, you will see equal milk to a U.S. cattle. I'm absolutely convinced of that. It's like I said, it's all about how you select the cattle. If you select more stockier, beefier cattle, you're not going to see more than 7,000 liters. If you select more of like more milk traits like tighter ribbed cows, you can almost see the genetics in every country, which is a good genetic profile, which is a inferior profile genetic. So you can almost select the cattle by looking at her and say, this cow has milk, this cow does not have milk.
Okay.
So it takes a trained person to be able to select a good producing cow.
So the point is that you need to select a good quality cattle. Then it doesn't matter it belongs to US, belongs to Dutch, or belongs to Australia, they will perform the same way as you want to say. Okay, that's fine, pretty nice. So tell me one more thing. There is a concept here in Pakistan that the Australian cattle, it gives on an average of 3 lactations. This American cattle is about 2.5 lactations, and this Dutch cattle, it performs like 6 to 7 lactations. So what's your goal when you talk about the number of lactations between these breeds?
Well, I think it comes down to the economics. The Dutch cattle are not really going 7 or 8 lactations or 3 lactations more than other countries. The reason we have maybe 2.5 lactations in the U.S. is because of the economics. It takes a different style of management in Pakistan than it does in the U.S., and plus the economics. The beef price of cattle in the U.S. is not much different than the purchase price of a replacement. The difference is maybe 20 to 30%, maybe. So it's economically a good decision to send a cow that is not producing, let's say, the average milk of, let's say, 30 liters. If she's down to 20 liters, it's more economically sound to sell that cow and buy another one back that is going to produce 30 liters.
You're talking about US.
I'm talking about U.S. or really anywhere else outside of Pakistan.
Yes, but this is not a scenario in Pakistan.
Exactly. So in Pakistan, it takes a better manager to manage U.S. cattle or Australian or Dutch.
So what you think that how much lactations we can expect from all three breeds?
Well, from any of the locations, it's all about management on the farm, right?
We can expect 4?
You can expect 2 to 3, 4.
3 to 4.
I would say on average, if you do a good job managing, you should get 4 lactations.
So
3.5 to 4.
You said that 3.5 to 4 lactations if you have a good management, irrespective of whether it belongs to Australia, to Netherlands, or to America. So I would like to ask you one more thing about the housing. There are 2 basic concepts here. One is the type of shed you can watch here. This is the shed, I think so you will have seen in many places. And the next is what our people call as the control shed, where all of the surroundings, they are covered by bricks and there is controlled environment by using the fans and the pads. So what do you think, which sort of management suits the best for these cattle? Which sort of housing is best?
It comes down to management, whether you're talking about free stalls, controlled, or an open shed like what we see here. If you want to bring the camera over there, you can see more of an open area.
Yeah.
It all depends on the style of management that you want on your farm.
Okay.
Free stalls are also very nice if you manage them properly. If you don't manage them properly, then an open shed. But it all comes down to proper management.
Yeah.
And of course, environment. No matter which style you go, you need an artificial environment during the hot summer months of Pakistan, because it is a cruel environment for the animals. So you need to keep them as comfortable as possible. Use as many fans and whatever it takes to keep that cow comfortable. That's really what you have to do.
So
don't do any overcrowding in your groups during those months. Your high producers should be about 100% of capacity or maybe 90% capacity, just so you don't overstress and they have lots of room to move around during those summer months.
Okay, let me clear one thing to my audience, my viewers, that we're gonna put the free stalls here. So just like a part-time arrangement, we'll put cubicles here and we'll shift the animals because the shed is under construction. So tell me one thing, that if you are you are a manager at a dairy farm, you have to manage cows. So can you please give us some tips to regulate the heat stress management, and what are the key measures that you need to adopt that in any shed? What are the basic things that you must pinpoint to control the heat stress in animals?
Well, like I said, don't overcrowd your groups during the summertime, and especially on your high producers, your higher stressed cows. Keep those separated from the lower produced cows. Try to have quality groups where you can say these are high producing cows, these are medium producing cows. The competition between the groups and between the cattle have to be fair competition. You cannot put a weaker cow with a stronger cow, because that weaker cow will get pushed out of the way. Keep feed always fresh in front of them. Feed 3 times a day and clean out your bunks between feedings. Make sure your water is always clean and always good access to water. Make sure your fans are working. Your soakers are basically set on timers, because it isn't the water that cools the cow. It's actually the time that the water shuts off and the fans are running. That's the part where the cow gets cool.
So it's about evaporative cooling, you say?
Exactly. So all of these things, every little thing is important. So if you do, let's say 50% of the things that are required, you're not going to have a good success. You need to shoot for about 90% of good management. you will be okay.
Sir, I would like you to please tell the audience what are the key points when you're going to select a heifer, a quality heifer.
Good foot and legs. Body condition should be reasonable. And just look for dairy characteristics. Look at some high milk yield cows, and look and whatever those traits are, remember those when you're selecting. So your higher producing cows, remember what that cow looks like, and try to use that as a model when you're selecting, and try to have uniformity in your groups. Let's say, don't have large cows with smaller cows. So uniformity is also important.
So would you like to please give us some dietary guidelines, because these animals, they have just arrived Pakistan about 3-4 days ago. The many people which have brought these cows, so what are the suggestions for them? What is your basic key advice for them?
My basic advice is don't push them. The first 2 to 3 weeks, leave them alone. Do what basically needs to be done. And I was telling your manager here, there should only be maybe 1 or 2 people walking through the heifers for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Let them relax. As far as nutrition goes, don't push them. Don't try to put on extra kgs to get the body score, let's say at a 3.1 or a 3.2, which is what you want. They will get there, but let them get there slowly. Don't push them immediately. Push them about 3 weeks to 4 weeks after they arrive.
Okay, that's pretty nice. So would you share some of the transition cow protocols, the freshening protocols with the audience, please?
In what way? That's a broad term.
Yeah, but I want to ask that how should we take care of a fresh cow? Just few words.
Well, let's say 3 days before parturition, try to get them separated in a group by themselves, 3 or 4 or 5 cows, and just leave them alone and just watch them closely. After they parturate, don't put them in a high stress group or in a high producing group. I try to keep them separated for the first 30 days.
Okay.
By themselves, so that's still fair competition. Those cows are under a lot of stress after calving, and they require a lot of management. So the first 30 days, if you can get that cow up and going, that cow is on autopilot for the rest of her lactation. She'll breed better, she'll produce better, she'll have better milk yields. Her peak milk will be longer. So it's just smart to have a good fresh cow program for the first, let's say, 21 to 30 days before you start pushing them. Don't push them the first 30 days.
So just tell me about their breeding abilities. Like if you are having a cow which just reached a peak of milk production just first 30 days, like yielding 45 liters of milk, then how can we able to conceive that cow in first 90 days with this much milk production?
Well, you just put her in a high group and feed her accordingly.
So,
right? So she's in a group that is in a high producing group. Some of these cows are going to produce more milk, but they're going to eat more as well to compensate for that extra milk. You don't have to worry about a special diet for those that are 50 liters compared to those that are 35 liters. They will eat more to compensate for that milk that they're producing.
There is a concept that the reproduction is a reciprocal to the milk production. Higher the milk production, low is the conception rate. So what's your go with that?
Well, absolutely, because the higher the milk production, the more stress that cow is under. The more stress, the more difficult your breeding will be with her. So
will it be able to get one calf every year?
Our goal is always to be 120 days pregnant, right? That's always my target. So if I've got a high producing cow, let's say that's 45 liters of milk at day 60, I will push the breeding, the first service, to maybe 100 days on a cow like that, and not, let's say, the standard 60 days to first service. So I might go 100, 110, but my goal is all cows should be pregnant at 120 days.
Okay,
that's always my goal.
So you are saying that the first insemination must be around 100 days?
No, if she's 45 liters.
If she's a high producer, then the first service must be around 100 days to get maximum conception rate, because at that time you wanted to say she is not in that stress.
Right, and there's several reasons why I would maybe the 10% of your herd will fall into that category of 45. The ultra producer cow, let's say. So it's not only that for reproduction, I'm going to breed her at 100 days. It's also when she's milking throughout her lactation, I don't want to dry her off at 30 liters or 25 liters. So if I can push that breeding back a little bit, and at day 220 days carried calf, I hope that she's at about 20 liters, not 30 liters. Okay. Right? So it's all about what is more suitable for that cow. And every cow needs to be managed separately, but we do it as a group.
Okay.
Right? Some cows fall through the cracks, and you're going to say, well, this cow doesn't fit what's going on in this group, so she's an exception from that group.
Okay,
there's always exceptions.
There is a theory that if you want to increase the conception rates in the next lactation, then give them a dry period of 30 days, only 30 days. So if you are giving them a dry period of 30 days only, in the next lactation, she may not be able to produce that much compared to a cattle with a dry period of 45 days, but with good pregnancy rates. What do you think?
Yeah, I haven't done the scientific research to say that 30 days is better than 45. For me, I like to keep it at 60-day dry period. So once they reach 200 or 220 to 230, I like to stop milking them at 230 days carried calf, depending on the milk production. So that gives them about 60-day, 50-day dry period. And the cows need a break.
Yeah.
Let's face it. These cows are working hard year-round, especially in the peak heat months of summer. So for me, if I can get that cow on a nice holiday for 30 days, or let's say 60 days, she's going to come back stronger.
Okay, so tell me one thing. You have been working with the U.S. cattle since long. What do you think? What are the major metabolic issues you have seen in them?
Well, that's all down to management as well. A good management program on your fresh cows, and it's usually the first 30 days that you're talking about for metabolic problems. Yeah. So your focus should be on the first 30 days. If you can focus on good management for the first 30 days, like I said, that cow will be on autopilot for the rest of her lactation. She'll breed better. She'll have higher peak milk. She'll have longer peaks. She'll breed better. So there are so many things that go into play by having a good management program for the first 30 days of that cow's lactation.
What's about the beet pulp silage? Nowadays, the people, they're talking about it. It's readily available and it's a cheap source. So many people talk about whether you should use it or not. So what do you think? What's your stance about the beet pulp silage?
Yeah, I think beet pulp has a place, right? But you need to have a balanced ration, and beet pulp should not be the key ingredient.
Yeah.
I love feeding citrus. That's also a seasonal product.
Yeah.
So take advantage of all of the items that you can feed, but do it in moderation.
Okay, tell me one thing. As the people say that these U.S. cattle, they are high flow cows. So if you are milking them at the parlor, and you are putting cluster on their teats, the size of the claw, I'm talking about the size of the claw.
The volume of milk that goes into the claw.
Into the claw. What should be the minimum volume for that?
I don't know. I mean, you have to ask your valve dealer on that one.
So it's a big, actually we are confused. Some people said it should be about 250, some said it should be more than 250. So I was concerned, so you don't have any idea about it.
I can't really comment on that because I don't really know the sizes. The thing you don't want to do is flooding. So you don't want that claw to flood where the milk goes back into the teat end, which is the reason why you want a larger volume claw, right? So you don't have that flooding in the claw that the milk is going to go back to the teat end and create mastitis. And this is what creates mastitis. This is the reason you want a larger volume claw.
Tell me one thing, that we have our local breeds here as well. The crossbred cattle is available, like the crosses with the Sahiwal is crossed with the Holstein Friesian, like the Cholistan is crossed with the Holstein Friesian. We have cases of toxic mastitis in them, but they survive the case. So when we talk about the toxic mastitis and this Friesian cattle, most of the time we have to face expiry. Animal is dead. What is the reason? Why they are so sensitive?
Well, because they're under more stress, first of all. So a cow that's under more stress is going to have more problems. And it comes down to management again. Is if you can catch the mastitis early enough, you should be able to reduce the mortality. So it's all about early detection and prevention.
You think so that if we go for early detection of toxic mastitis, these animals, they can avoid expiry, they can avoid death?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
That's pretty good.
I'm not saying that you'll have 100% success, but even if you have 90% success, you should not have 100% mortality on all cases, right? So maybe you might have 10% that will expire.
Okay, that's pretty good. So one more thing, this year some of our this Pro Farm, I think, so they have also brought the American Jersey cattle as well. So what's about American Jersey and the Jersey cattle from Australia? Again, do you have the same stance that both of them are same depending on the selection, or is there some genetic difference?
No, it would be equal.
Again, it would be equal.
Yes.
Because the people, I will not name the people, they are marketing with the stance that number one, they will not have the paintless udders like Australian cattle. Number two, they will produce more milk in the first lactation, like 75 hundreds of liters of milk in first lactation. Number three, their milk fat will be above 5% compared to Australian Jersey, producing about 4.6 to 4.8% of fat. So what do you think?
Well, I like I said, that comes down to the genetics, and the genetics are equal everywhere. And even in the U.S., you've got some farms that have just bad genetics. They use herd bulls, and they're not really focused on high-producing animals. They're focused on just getting their cattle bred and getting the calves, and they basically even sell their calves to the open market, right? So between jerseys in Australia, jerseys in the U.S., it still comes down to selection, because you have bad breeders, you have good breeders.
Yeah.
Right? So select your cattle from good breeders, and you will have equal results from either Australia or the US.
Okay. Now, one last question. The people mostly ask us about the selection of bull for breeding these cattle.
Herd bulls.
Yeah, herd bulls.
Okay.
Especially, I know one thing, that it depends on the appearance of the cow, the phenotypic and genetic traits of the cow. We are selecting a bull. For a farmer which is having 7 to 10 cattle cannot afford veterinary services. So can you give us 4 or 5 points in selection of a herd bull generally for any sort of cattle?
Right. First, I'm not a believer in herd bulls. Right. I still think it's cheaper whether you have 10 or you have 1,000 cattle.
You do not believe in herd bulls?
Not for quality genetics.
What should we do for quality genetics?
Well, AI, artificial breeding.
Yes, I'm talking about AI. Yes, I'm talking about
of
AI.
Of course you
yeah.
are, but you're talking about a herd bull compared to AI.
Let me again complete my question. Maybe I'm confusing it. I'm talking about you are selecting bulls for insemination of these cows. I told you that the people, they have every single animal may require a different bull for insemination. But if somebody living in the far area in Pakistan does not have enough services for the selection of the bull for insemination, what are the general key points to be kept in mind for those farmers which are staying away from in the far areas having no services?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Quite tough.
Yeah, I mean, my heart goes out to those guys because they're not really into the main.
People are fond of keeping cattle, it's very expensive cattle. Everyone does not have the capacity to buy 50 or 100 cows. Some has brought 10, some has brought 20. But the 20 if someone is having a herd with 20 cattle, cannot afford a veterinarian to be 24/7 at a farm. So for them, I want that to please tell us some simple points that how a bull should be selected for insemination of a cattle.
Yeah, one of the main traits that I always select is health and longevity. Okay. So if I can select health traits and longevity, meaning that that bull's daughters live longer than the average herd mates, that means that bull will be
more lactations.
More lactations, and probably a stronger, hardier cow. That's what I would recommend for those guys that are, let's say, out of the mainstream.
What's about a TPI?
I don't go by TPI. Total Performance Index is not important to me. People
are always talking about TPI here.
Okay, total performance index.
Yeah.
I look at the health traits and I look at the longevity. For me, it's more important to have a longer living cow than it is to have a lot of milk for a shorter time, right? So I'd rather have 4 lactations of a cow with 30,000 than 2 lactations of a cow with 50,000 liters.
So you're
Or let's say 50 liters per day as compared to 30 liters, 35 liters per day.
Okay, that's his point of view here. He said that his focus will be on the health and longevity rather than the total performance index, because he is concerned about the life of the cattle rather than taking more milk for a shorter period of time. So thank you very much, Mr. Tony, Mr. Phillip.
Yeah.
I'm really
And I would like to say another comment.
Yeah,
When you look at TPI and you look at the health traits, that means that a cow that's staying in the herd longer, she's outperforming the herd mates already if you look at health and you look at longevity. That means she's not leaving the herd at all. She's staying in the herd much longer than the herd mates. So she's outperforming her herd mates.
Yes.
So TPI is not really a good measurement to look at for selecting bulls. If that's the only trait you're going to look at, you will be disappointed.
Okay, so it was a very nice session with Mr. Phillip. I hope so that all of you must have got the benefit out of this. If you have any question, you can ask in the comment section. मुझे इजाज़त दें जी, अगले सेशन तक के लिए, नेक्स्ट सेशन तक अपना ख्याल रखिएगा, दुआ में याद रखिएगा। अस्सलाम वालेकुम।